All right, I'm Connor Sinclair with Kast. The date is June 15th, 3050, and we have Mektek Stompy Robot with us. John, Mr. Nugget.
Yeah, Mr. Nguyen.
And then we've got Mike Prinke.
Hello.
Our interviewer today is going to be Valkyrie. Go ahead, Val.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Just to clarify, because Connor butchers everything, the guys here are from Stompy Robot Productions, the not the producers, but the publishers for Mektek's Heavy Gear Assault, which is their upcoming free-to-play Heavy Gear game. John, Mike, would you mind telling me a little bit about what you guys do there?
Yeah, sure. I'm the marketing director for Stompy Bot Productions. We're are the publisher, obviously, and we're the ones that take care of pretty much press relations, as well as the Kickstarter campaign, as well as the crowdfunding campaign that we're running on our own site.
And I am one of the technical designers and gameplay programmers working on the development team at Mektek Studios. All
right, so one of the things that I wanted to start off with here was, I know a lot of us are obviously coming from a MechWarrior Battletech background. Some of us may be sort of semi-familiar with Heavy Gear. It's just kind of one of those things where we see it at the game store. I've got a friend who works for DreamPod 9, actually does some of the art over there. But a lot of us aren't too familiar with like the whole universe or the style, or because obviously you have different kinds of giant robot sort of games where you've got the real fast sort of Armored Core style, Gundam style robot games, and then you have the more Western stuff like BattleTech, where everything's very slow and methodical. Laser even mentioned that he used to see the Heavy Gear books at his local game store all the time, and the computer game boxes elsewhere, and he saw a couple episodes of the cartoon way back in the day, but he doesn't really know a whole lot about the doesn't know a lot about the universe itself, the North and South factions, how they how they interact with the pledge levels, all that stuff. So, would you guys mind telling us just kind of a little bit about Heavy Gear itself and what it is?
Yeah, Heavy Gear is Heavy Gear started out life as an RPG, but before that, the world was crafted around that. But the first actual product was a card game in '93 by DreamPod 9. And that evolved into a whole RPG set of books, if you guys are familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, obviously. So it was a pen and paper game, and the whole world was created around giant robots and combat and these factions that all belong on a planet called Terra Nova. And basically you have two meta factions, the North and the South, which hate each other's guts and who wage war with each other using gears. And that's, in a nutshell, what it is. Obviously, it goes into a lot more detail than that, but that's essentially what Heavy Gear is all about.
Yeah, and of course, in the late 90s, it was adapted by Activision into a couple of computer games for the PC. Heavy Gear 1 and then Heavy Gear 2.
And then Sony picked up the rights and actually did a series of cartoons based around the arena settings in the Heavy Gear lore, because that's actually part of the lore. That's actually the number one sport that Terra Novans enjoy, is watching these war machines fight each other in a competitive setting. And after that, currently DreamPod 9 is still printing Heavy Gear. And it's now taking the form of Heavy Gear Blitz, which is a tabletop war game with some pretty awesome miniatures.
Okay, so one of the things I did want to ask was to tell us a little about the factions. I think one of our guys in our MWOG thread yesterday, we were talking about Heavy Gear, and he showed us some examples. I can't remember exactly who it was. May have been Kalis. It was showing us some examples of the different gears from the North and South factions. Would you mind telling us, just kind of just a quick primer, I guess, in relation to how those factions sort of interact?
Well, basically, the planet Terra Nova is mostly an arid world, right? So even though it has all the kinds of environments that you would find on Earth, most of those habitable zones are either in the North Pole or the South Pole. And in the middle is this band of desert called the Badlands, floating around the equator, the hottest zone of the planet, obviously. And so these polar regions are home to a loose set of alliances and various countries that form these alliances. In the north, basically, it's three countries. You have the Norlight Confederacy, you have the United Mercantile Federation, and you have the Western Protectorate. And these countries have coexisted harmoniously, more or less, throughout their entire history and development during the colonial era of Terra Nova, and have formed together willingly into a mutual defense pact and also a economic bloc. In the South, it's a little different story. You had one extremely powerful league called the Southern Republic, who pretty much conquered all the other countries around them, and now formed a what I think is pretty fun for a title. They call themselves the Allied Southern Territories, but there's nothing about an alliance there. It's clearly a subjugation. Very reminiscent of the Warsaw Pact with Soviet Russia. So they pretty much tell other people what to do and how to live their lives. Whereas in the North, it's closer to NATO, more like a mutual alliance than anything else.
How different are their gears exactly? I remember when we were looking at that part of the thread yesterday, I think it was Harabek actually who was showing that to us. Sorry, Kalis. I noticed a lot of the designs seem to be very different. How's the tech sort of work? Is it a little bit different on each side? I noticed the northern mechs seem to all be the northern gears seem to be a little bit more blocky, whereas the southern ones are a little more rounded as far as aesthetics go. Are there any sort of performance changes between the two?
Yes.
Go ahead,
yes.
Mike. You can go ahead.
I can field this one, yeah. So the gist of how gears came to evolve on Terra Nova was they were initially engineered by the North with the very first gear, the Hunter, and eventually the South basically robbed a set of engineers and got them to put together their own version of the Hunter, that being the Jaeger. And from there, each of them kind of expanded into their own sets of gears. In many cases, they have equivalent models of gears. So for the Hunter, there's the Jaeger. For the Kodiak, there's the Spitting Cobra or the Black Mamba.
The King Cobra.
The King. Yeah, the King Cobra would be the equivalent for the right. And then for like the Ferret, there's what? Or no, not the Ferret. Let's pick something a little more comparable. For like the Cheetah in the North, the South has
the Iguana.
Yeah. And so there's all these very equivalent weight classes and classifications of gears, but they do each have a very different focus. In the North, gears tend to be more specialized. So a Kodiak is a big assault gear, and it is entirely focused towards assault. It doesn't have very heavy. Well, it has heavy armor by nature of being a very big, very heavy set gear, but not as much as it could. And it's just meant to stay behind the lines and 100% just support. And it's got a lot of different weapons. I think you were saying earlier to me, John, that are built specifically for just being support. If it ever got in a close range fight, it would be kind of screwed.
Yeah, the grizzly. I know you were saying the Kodiak. Kodiak's really.
I keep saying the Kodiak because it's cool and I love it. Yeah, I'm sorry.
And both are bears.
Both are bears. So like, yeah.
It's the grizzly that's the baseline assault class. Yeah.
But to maybe further develop what Mike was saying, gears in the North tend to be highly specialized in their role, and they're not really. They're really optimized for that specific role, whereas gears in the South are a little bit more general. They tend to be be able to support many different roles, but none of them as particularly well as their northern counterpart, say.
Yes.
One specific role. An example of that is the Grizzly and the Spitting Cobra. Both are considered fire support gears in their respective factions. But the Grizzly has less armor than a Spitting Cobra. And its primary weapon is a heavy guided mortar. So it is designed specifically to lay down guided mortar shells at long range. And now it has a whole bunch of other secondary weapons, but those are more defensive in nature than actual offensive weapons. And in contrast, you see the Spitting Cobra It has a large rocket pack in the back. It has rockets as well on the shoulder. It has a lighter mortar, and it has a heavy autocannon as well. And it also has heavier armor. So, whereas the Grizzly can lay down very accurate, devastating fire at long range, it can't. And surely it can fight in a medium setting and in a face-to-face setting, but it's not designed for that. It's not optimized for that. Whereas a Spitting Cobra can do a medium attack. It can go face-to-face in a medium. It can go into an assault role because it has heavier armor, but it's not optimized for long-range fire support because it has inaccurate dumbfire rockets.
Yeah, not completely optimized, right?
Right? But it can do it. It can do it. It can fire a whole barrage of rockets down range. That's fine,
yeah.
But
Visago in the chat, you've got it exactly right. The southern gears are more generalist, and the northern gears are more specialist. It's kind of like comparing and contrasting like the United States Marines versus the Army, where the Marines, everybody, the saying there is everybody's a rifleman. At least I think that's the saying.
Yeah.
And in the US,
rifleman.
And
yeah, every man a rifleman. Every Marine a rifleman.
And then the Army, meanwhile, you have much more specialized like support artillery. You have the whole, tank corps. You've got things that the Marines just never even get to field. But then the Marines' mindset is they don't need to field them.
So this is really good info, just because I know obviously the bundles that you have on your site for pledges are going to be a little bit different. So it's good to know what kind of stuff you want to buy. If you want to play a certain way. Malphus, you had a question?
Yeah. The gears from north and south, they're more specialized, but is that in their equipment or are the frames themselves more specialized?
A little bit of both, actually.
Yeah, a little bit of both. If
I've noticed something.
Yeah?
It seems the design of the weaponry and stuff in Heavy Gear, it's modular. You can attach a missile pack of 8 missiles to your shoulders of your mech and stuff. So, maybe that giant cannon on whatever the other gear was could be attached to the other faction's gear.
Yeah, in fact, in Heavy Gear 1, the design of gears was so modular that they just let you mix and match entire sets of parts. And that was a little bit problematic because you could put like grizzly arms on a ferret or something, and it would make it look like it was a friggin' ape gear. You know what I mean? Just these giant arms on this tiny little gear, and it didn't fit. We aren't going that far with customization. I will tell you, but loadout customization is a very frequent thing in the rule books, I believe. They tend to have a list of viable gear for specific frames. But yeah, there is a degree of customization to what you can fit on it, especially in Heavy Gear Arena.
Oh, and about things like arms and legs and stuff. Would it be possible, for example, if I wanted to, could I attach a grenade launcher to my legs? Could I attach like a Vulcan gun to my left arm if I wanted to? Because there's this thing I really love about mecha, and it's how like I can just put a whole bunch of weaponry on my gear or my mechanical
robot
avatar.
period.
Yeah, that's kind of the appeal of mecha in general, from both a fan standpoint, I think, and a practical military standpoint, is this idea that it doesn't just carry, the 1 or 2 weapons that a person could. You can mount all kinds of stuff to it, just a menagerie of equipment and weapons and things. We are still looking into what mounts exactly there are going to be on a gear, in that we're still, in a way, implementing a lot of the baseline systems of this game. We haven't ruled out leg mounts. We haven't ruled out arm mounts. In fact, if I look at the skeletal mesh right now, yeah, we've got arm mounts there. Whether we're using them for shields or using them to store certain pieces of small equipment versus mounted weaponry, that remains to be seen in play balancing. So that'll be down the road that we can answer that question more directly. But yeah, we're looking into all kinds of places to mount weapons. Right now, at the very least, we've got shoulders, back, and each of your hands can equip a weapon. And then finally, there's a slot in the torso where you can put like an internal machine gun.
Okay, Visago, you had a question?
Yeah,
Sorry,
what
no.
I'm gathering from all this is basically the customization is going to be at least on par with, say, MechWarrior Online and other mecha games and mecha franchises in general. Yeah.
We are certainly hope so. We are certainly hoping so, I should say. We would like to take it to a whole different kind of level, actually. We'd like you to be able to customize that stuff as well as the appearance of your gear. That's kind of one of that's like one of the core appeals of doing the arena setting, is that instead of driving around this crummy mass production expendable army gear, you're driving around a high performance race car gear that is customized, that you can put like decals for your sponsors on, that you can put different types of paint jobs, different types of finishes on. Ideally, you'd like to be able to swap out different sets of armor plates for the same type of gear. So there might be a version of the Hunter that's got normal armor plates. There might be a spiky Hunter. There might be a lightweight Hunter variant. In fact, in the rules, there is a lightweight Hunter variant.
There is. There's a stripped down Hunter, which loses a lot of its armor, but gains a little bit more maneuverability and speed. There's also a civilian version Hunter, because the Hunter is so popular that it's leaked into the civilian market, and crazy kids drive them around their town instead of cars.
But even now, our material system has 3 different types of finishes that you can put on a gear, including metallic finish, there's one that's more of a race car metal fleck finish, and then there's one that's more of a matte finish for those of you who are fans of the more drab military look. And then beyond that, the internals are also something that we'd like to be able to customize. I've put together a system whereby you can tweak the output of the engine, you can tweak both the speed and the strength ratings of your hydraulics, and that's one of the trade-offs in optimizing your gear that we're looking for players to be able to explore, is being able to optimize your hydraulics for whatever type of build you're trying to create, as well as your engine and your secondary movement system and all that sort of thing. The internals of a gear as well as the external elements are something that we're wanting to make very customizable.
Okay, so let me go ahead and jump over. I got a few more quick questions from the audience, and then I want to move on a little bit. Malphus had another question.
I've got actually 3 just listening to you. First off, it's just going back to the weapons thing. When you say weapons in your hand, you mean just holding things, right?
There are handheld weapons and there are mounted weapons.
Alright, that's cool. And then, actually, I'll just skip the second question because it's just a point rather than a question. My third question is, you mentioned hydraulics in the leg. Can I upgrade my hydraulics to, like, I don't know, 3 times the strength, and then drop kick people for tons of damage?
I would very, very much like to make that dream of yours a reality.
Oh my god, yes. Yes, please.
I don't know about 3 times the strength. That's a question for play balancing, of course.
But that could be also hilarious if you want to like really do some mad jumps.
Triple strength
Mailer, the jumping.
Heavy gear.
Actually, the jumping is already something that's in.
Right. Anyway,
if I did give your hydraulics 3 times the strength, you would notice you'd have faster acceleration and higher jumping, as well as if there are any leg-based melee attacks, it would certainly affect the strength at which you are able to kick things. And you would be able to, if you have like a spitting cobra with a 3 times strength set of hydraulics, then you could freaking drop kick a ferret like several meters through the air.
It's the second thing I was gonna say.
It's a suborbital ferret.
It's a matter of us getting the assets together for the animations to do all this stuff is more the issue than anything, as well as making sure our physics system is up to scratch to make that nice and satisfying.
Anyway, my second point I was going to make was back when you guys were going over the setting. The whole appeal of the arena setting is you don't get some shit-faced generic mech. No, this is the arena. This is your gear. It is your machine that you customize and make your own.
There's lots
I'm still laughing for the drop.
Yeah, there's lots of different reasons that we like the arena setting, which I'm sure I will be going into as we get on with the interview.
Please do.
Being able to bling out your gear. Like, seriously, if I could make it so that you could fit spinners on your secondary movement system, that would be...
Oh my god.
You know what I mean? People love... This is the core appeal of this type of game. This is the core appeal of doing the miniatures, right? Like, I paint Warhammer miniatures. Part of the reason you do that sort of thing is because it is just fun to bling out your shit.
Yeah, pimp it. Totally
To clarify for people who aren't familiar with heavy gear, gears have a secondary motion system. In addition to just running around, they typically have either wheels or treads on the bottom of their feet so they can make a high-speed movement.
Or other things.
Some gears actually have air cushions and they can hover.
Herbeck had a question as well.
One of our audience members here.
Yeah, Herbeck is sort of our heavy gear expert, I think, and he had a question for y'all.
Well, you actually answered my question. I was going to ask if y'all were planning on letting the internals, like servo motors, hydraulics, all that, be interchangeable.
Yeah.
Anyway. Games.
Oh yeah, that's a core aspect of the damage system as well.
I'm imagining what Malf said, having like all of my endo steel upgraded, and then kicking somebody and breaking my foot off in their exhaust. Just come up behind the guy and kick him so hard my leg comes off.
I'm gonna kick you so hard your head's gonna leak motor oil.
If you want to push your gear beyond suggested parameters,
right? It's
then
physical.
that is absolutely something that we want to allow you to do.
When your internals are stronger than your own armor.
So Vasago had he had a question as well, and he did want to ask you all about location damage too, I think. Vas?
Yeah.
Yes.
We've got a question from
How
Rifleman,
about
actually.
location damage and such? In stuff like Haken and general shooters, you shoot a guy, he drops dead. In something more detailed like MechWarrior, if you shoot someone in the leg, it does damage to the leg and only the leg. How are you gonna implement the damage model?
Well, what we want to implement is we have actual damage to the internals as well as the external. And so you would be able to customize your armor plating that goes on the exterior of your gear. And damage will have a certain profile that will allow it to either pierce the armor or just damage the internals directly with just force being transferred through. An example of this is, let's say there's a railgun, because in the lore there are railguns, and a railgun against, say, a heavily armored vehicle, but it's pretty much light in internals. There's not many internals. It would just go right through the armor, out the other side, and not do much damage. Whereas if damage is coming out of something like Snub Cannon, which is an in-lore game that transfers tremendous kinetic energy, it can go into the armor and then not necessarily damage the armor per se, but transfers the kinetic energy through and damage internal systems.
I've got two questions here.
It's a big difference between a laser shot going into your gear versus someone bashing you over the head with
a mace.
With a power mace or I don't think that's the name of it.
No, it would just simply be a mace or hammer or a vibro blade.
It's not like a vibro mace. Yeah, it's
right.
Just a mace. It's just a big heavy. Right. Sorry.
Okay. So we had one last question from Connor, and then we need to move on with a couple other things too. Connor?
My question is on your damage system. It's starting to sound like Star Siege, and Herbeck, of course, played Star Siege, hence his namesake. The way their system worked is when you shot a mech, it did a % of internal damage, rather than just saying, oh, the leg is gone. In MWO, you shoot the leg until it dies. So in your game, you're basically saying that there will be sort of a level of damage on the internal, even with. I like that.
Okay, so
I like that.
That is correct. There's each different part that you can damage has a structure variable to it. And so various different systems can read the structure and use that to compute the way your gear is performing. In addition to that, each part is able to designate an event that fires off when it hits certain damage thresholds. There's one for critical damage, where it's basically injured or disabled. And then there's one for destruction, where you can blow it clean off. And so we kind of have the best of both worlds, where we are able to give you variable output based on the damage that you've taken, as well as event-based conditions that can happen that can cause very specific things to happen at very specific times. So you'll know when you hit the critical damage threshold. Oh, you will know. In the meantime, you'll notice as your legs take damage to the internals that your speed as you're running will steadily decline. If you take damage to your engine, your horsepower will steadily decline and your hydraulic pressure will steadily decline. And so there's a lot of adapt to survive built into this damage system, where you start out with what you might think is going to be an optimal play style for you, but taking enough damage to the right part can force you to completely change strategies in the middle of a match.
Okay, so going off of that, I do want to move on to our next topic. I do want to talk about balancing with this. Obviously, free-to-play games suffer from a situation where you don't want to become pay-to-win, but at the same time, you have to have everything balanced well enough so that way you can sort of work with the numbers and figure out something that works for both the paying players and the unpaying players. So the first thing I wanted to ask about that was, what kind of gameplay are we looking at here? I think I've seen like a little bit of the stuff that was shown previously about the alpha, I think. So it looks like it's not really a hard sim like you would like say a MechWarrior or something like that. But it's not quite a really super fast, Armored Core virtual on type game where you're zipping it all over the place, from place, just dumping missiles into the air, for example. I think we did have actually a community question about that from Quantum Butler, also asking about how melee attacks are going to work in this game. Would you mind elaborating a little bit, kind of on how y'all plan to do your balancing first of all, and then just kind of some of the stuff that we're looking at as far as melee, ranged weapons, missiles, and how they're going to work?
First thing, in terms of the type of balance that we're trying to do, it's very strongly rooted in the more Western style of mech simulation, where it is very much a simulation. You are controlling the gear with a throttle. It feels like a vehicle when you're piloting it and things like that. At the same time, the type of mech that you're piloting is inherently very fast and maneuverable. And so it is a bit... it will end up coming off a little bit more light, a little bit more fast-paced than a traditional mech simulator.
You're basically saying kind of like the missing link between, say, Armored Core and MechWarrior, for example. Like I love the old Armored Core games and how they were somewhat stompy, but at the same time you had a little bit of speed when you had the boost going. I didn't really like stuff like For Answer, where you're kicking it to thousands of kilometers per hour. But at the same time, I always kind of wanted something sort of in between. Is that kind of what y'all are going for?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, that's in the Heavy Gear lore. These mechs move around. These gears move around fairly quickly and very nimbly. They're more so, the way they move would be more reminiscent of giant infantrymen than mechs, your traditional mechs, where you have them kind of stompy around. Sure, the bigger ones like King Cobras and Kodiak, they might be a little bit more stompy, but the average gear are definitely more akin to giant infantrymen and more of an Eastern style of giant robots. If you're familiar with Vodum, that's pretty much representative of how these gears should move.
Yeah, that's the type of experience that we're trying to do, and we're trying to do it in the context of a fairly hard simulator type of experience. We want it to feel like you're playing a mech simulator and less so like you're playing a first-person shooter.
I've got so many questions.
In terms of, let's see, what were the other? In terms of balancing the different types of weaponry against each other, right? Play balancing is going to end up playing a big part in that. Like, there aren't any guarantees for what the balance is going to be like until we get to the stage where we have a nice big variety of weapons and we're tweaking them in an actual match. That said, one of the other opportunities that the arena concept has given us is that we can explore all types of game types. For instance, we can have a game type where all you have is a sniper duel, right? We can have a game type where it's just gladiatorial battles with melee, and all we're trying to balance is melee against melee. Rocket jousting is a game type in the heavy gear arena.
Okay, I got to stop you right there because we need more information at this point.
What do you?
Is that playing chicken with
All I
rocket
heard
launchers?
was jousting, and I was like, "What?"
And rocket.
You have my attention.
It's a combat arena with giant robots that can be holding any type of weapon. It's not. That's right, Pizza Dog. It's not just 2 game modes. We can have all kinds of game modes because it's a sporting event, right? It's any type of sporting event is eligible to be a game type here.
I've never heard of rocket jousting. Okay, please explain that.
Well, you basically put your gears on a pair of rocket power sleds, give them a set of vibro lances, and send them at each other at top speed.
Oh my god!
And try to kill one another.
I hear the Vikings did that.
Sounds like something we do.
Viking rockets.
The Vikings did that when they came here from Mars. Yes.
Yeah, and
God.
they always traditionally precede this event with reindeer blood wine.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's a very colorful universe with some very colorful sports that we want to bring to life for y'all. Well, something that I'm really excited about, and this is a little bit off topic, is that the secondary movement system alone has all sorts of possibilities for game types, right? So they're basically like a set of skates. You know what I mean?
So let's totally do some extreme sports style racing.
Yeah,
with guns.
You could have
robots.
You could have a whole game mode where all you do is you just do tricks and try to give the best exhibition that you can. That could totally be a game mode for people who just get bored of shooting each other all day.
Tony Hawk's Pro Gear.
So I do have to ask at this point. So this sort of begs the question.
But to get back to, I want to get back to your original question. I feel like I sort of redirected the conversation at this point.
Yeah, and that's not a problem. I did want to ask one quick thing before you move on, though. Is just, while we're talking about all these different game modes, one of the concerns that I know we've had with MWO is splitting the user base. How are y'all going to be doing? I guess will you have private matches available for people who just want to do, they just want to do rocket jousting 24/7, and then you have other people who just want to do deathmatch? Is that going to be a thing?
I think that's sort of addressed in the free to choose model.
Yeah, actually, our business model, premium. You basically a player who wants to host their own private server. They can become a premium member, and then at that point, they can host we give them all the tech.
Wow.
Yeah,
really?
like here.
Oh my gosh.
Because you're a premium member, right? So here's the tech, and host your own server. Sure, you can host your own
host.
Pay to host.
I love you, Pizza Dog.
I love you. Take my money.
Pay to host rocks.
I kind of like that.
But you can do that. You can also you also have access to your own map editor. So if you have your own server, and then you can pick your own maps, you can make your own game types. Yeah, do your own little crazy circuit of your own with your buddies.
Okay, sorry, but go ahead, Mike. Finish your thoughts.
Getting back to the balancing, right? It'll be easier to understand when you sort of go into the details of each of those systems. Very much the default game type where you just have everything at your disposal and you're doing like team-based kind of deathmatch gameplay. Every gear sort of has its role is the way we're looking at it. Every type of gear has its role, and that's more the way that we're exploring this is in terms of the different complete loadouts that gears have and what they're prepared for specifically, as opposed to melee versus guns. Melee and guns complement each other, One of them prepares you for a different set of circumstances than the other. Support weapons prepare you more for, I would say, long-range combat than anything else, and you are doing this in support of players who are more into close combat. You're giving them covering fire while they move in for the kill. That's sort of the way we're looking at this. We're looking at the whole ball of wax of the composition of your team and the classifications of gears that you're using and what roles that you want them to fit into.
Obviously, you guys have a huge, number of ideas that y'all are working on, concepts that you want to see implemented into this game. And so with that, I did want to, speak on our next topic here in regards to development road mapping. Totally Not Concast, which I love the name, was asking, when we can expect to see gameplay instead of just game assets and whatnot. I think GameSpot had gameplay video. I don't remember what the link was. Is that something y'all have up already?
That was actually a prototype. It wasn't even implementing all the features we wanted to put in.
Very specifically, it was a multiplayer and damage test. It was just barely able to run multiplayer, and it had our a preliminary version of our damage system in, and it was a decent enough showing for sort of generating interest at GDC, but it wasn't really meant to be taken as a full-on alpha gameplay demo. We are approaching a first playable, something we're much more comfortable with calling a first playable, within the next week or so.
Okay, and Malphus, you had another question?
Yeah, I've got a few questions stocked up here, but I'm going to start with the more awesome ones. For the mode of transportation system, can I be in wheel mode and then do a short hop and break into a Mega Man slide and go underneath somebody's gear?
Gears don't tend to have a lot of space between their legs.
Yeah, they're not that big.
What if I just cut through their legs with a chainsaw?
Well, that would be a much more viable solution. And in fact, I have a system devised that will allow you to do something like that.
This is some straight up Heavy Gear Rising Revengeance shit.
That's one of my favorite games. So I would very much like to be able to bring that experience to life for you. What we have for the support of the melee combat system is in the kind of the lore, in the technical manuals for Heavy Gear, you can read about this. They're called macro moves. Yeah. And basically what these are is they're kind of like keyboard shortcuts for gears that you can program to do sort of pre-programmed movements. We're using that for special attacks.
Yeah, totally broken razor shit.
Yeah, we're using that for special attacks. And this is totally in lore, totally in keeping with the simulation. You might have some prerequisites you need to settle. So maybe for that power slide chainsaw swing, you need to be at a full run to be able to do it. And then maybe you hold crouch and hit the melee attack button, and that's what you've got programmed to do your special attack, and then it'll just do it. I've got the system devised that will allow you to do it. We just need to get assets together for it.
Please allow us to jump over it, because instantly breaking legs wouldn't be fun, but it is completely badass.
Yeah. I'm
not going to guarantee you would instantly break legs, but it might trip people.
I've got something to follow up on that. Is there a chance that these macros could fail simply because you turn a corner too sharp, or because you don't have enough speed, or you're going too slow, and there's no momentum?
Can these
you'd
macros
fall over or trip or...
I see what you're asking me the Super Smash Brothers question.
Yes.
Not really.
It's something that I think needs to be addressed as far as balance goes too, because that was obviously a big problem in closed beta for MWO was the knockdown system.
It's not. It won't be. Okay. I will confess that I haven't thought that far ahead in terms of the macro move system. However, we have been thinking about that for the standard movement system, wherein if you hit a wall at too high a speed, or if you hit like something as high as your knees, you can fall over it.
That's what my concern is. It's piloting and gunnery.
Yes, we are very much looking to have that aspect of plausible failure if you do something that will very obviously cause your gear to fall over. That is not implemented yet. I will say that you won't see that in our upcoming gameplay demo because we still have to work on the ragdoll and physics system on a gear. It needs a little bit more tweaking on the physics before we're ready to support that, and we don't want to trigger it too easily. You know what I mean? We want you to be able to expect that if you back into like a barrier too quickly and you're just not looking, that you'll fall over it or something. We don't want you to just be accidentally tripping over fricking everything. We don't want it to feel random. We want it to feel like this was something inevitable that you were heading towards, and like the same kind of feeling you get when you have a car accident. And if you're a good enough pilot, you sort of avoid having these until somebody whams you in midair while you're trying to do a jump jet with a rocket, and then that, of course, sends you flying.
Okay. Harabek, was it Harabek or Kalos who had a question? I think it was Kalos, actually.
Kalos, I thought.
Sorry about that. Okay. So you mentioned team play dynamics. One question I think is all in all our minds is, what kind of scale are you talking? How many people per side? How big are these arenas? I think a lot of us would like to know that.
A lot of that stuff, I believe, is still very up in the air because we are still trying to nail down our content pipeline. Make sure everything is optimized, everything runs at a nice frame rate. I want to emphasize we are working with very experimental technology, being that this is an Unreal 4 game, and we're trying to make it, shine. We want this game to sing like Freddie Mercury, but at the same time, we want to be able to support a nice, big, open battlefield if we can. We want to be able to support, what's... John, give me a number here. What have the designers been fielding out for us?
The designers have been fielding something along the lines of supporting up to 16 players per side, so 32 players the entire thing. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
So the misconception that everyone's been saying, well, it's arena, it's 1-on-1, or best case 2-on-2. No. Remember when we were saying multiple game types, it can actually go up to like huge free-for-alls, and we're talking up to maybe support for 32 players on the network.
So going off of this, Darjeeling Kerensky submitted a question to us before the podcast, and this is again part of the development road mapping thing that I wanted to ask. He asked, basically, do you guys have a 1-year plan, so to speak? I mean, as far as what are you trying to hit as far as content goes once the game is ready to go live, as well as what other games have kind of helped shape the development of Heavy Gear and how you guys are planning out this content release.
Well, for 1-year plan, I can take care of that. For development, Mike would be more in the know. So for the 1-year plan, what we're hoping to achieve is to probably go to closed beta by Q1 and open beta by Q2, and the safety being the following quarter after that. That's if all goes well, and we get like tomorrow, hey, we got our money, and we can go ahead and develop the game full time and even go overtime on it. But our target date is the first quarter of 2014. We are also looking at that stage to have our multiplayer arena set up, being able to play with all the game modes that we've mentioned, as well as have the server technology and the editor available to our premium membership. And our first single-player episode as well would be part of that.
That's something I think I've really wanted to be knowing, especially because the next question I wanted to ask was, there's two questions. Question's twofold. First of all, how are you guys? I know you guys are really good about talking with the community. That's kind of how we got the whole podcast set up. So I'm assuming you guys will be really good about keeping us up to date with dev diaries and whatnot, telling us what's going on in the studio and where you are and what you got planned. But the other question I wanted to ask in relation to that was what Adam Carolla. I listen to the Adam Carolla show all the time, and he talks about keeping the pirate ship afloat. Obviously, this is going to be an ongoing sort of development thing where the game is still getting new content added to it on a regular basis, and we've talked a little bit about the premium content stuff, like the hosting your own servers. But what other kind of premium content are you going to be using? And then what are you all prioritizing as far as what the available funding is? So let's say, for example, you have so much money come in through the website, so you hit like $250K or so here in the next couple of months. Like what gameplay things are going to be prioritized first and foremost as you guys start to get everything together?
Well, first and foremost, we need to actually get a playable game system. So Mike was touching on earlier how we wanted to get an actual game mechanic going. Maybe you'd like to elaborate more on that, Mike?
Right now, what the development team is approaching is what we refer to as a first playable. Basically, it's basic multiplayer support for up to hopefully 16 gears, and then probably we've got, or not 16 gears, up to 16 gears on each side is what we'd like to be able to do, and then we probably have to optimize the crap out of this thing in order to actually get it to 16 gears on each side on something that's not just paper. That is, we'd like to be able to support the scale of combat that heavy gear fans are thirsting for. And we'd like to be able to get our basic, kind of get our feet under us in terms of basic mechanics support. So what we've got right now, right now, is about on par with a slightly unpolished Heavy Gear 2 gameplay. Following that, our focus will be on our more unique features. So applying more advanced physics to the way that the gear moves, that ability to trip and things like that, the ability to do tricks when you're doing secondary movement, ramping up the melee combat system to be a bit more dynamic and a bit more versatile, adding detail to all the places that developers in former years weren't sort of able to. However, something that the chat points out is that we do need funding pretty badly. A lot of these features are kind of contingent on us being able to continue developing this game, and I want to emphasize here, I am at this moment the only full-time programmer working on this project, aside from maybe one other guy who's a little bit more on the technical art side. Everybody else is pretty much part-time. They work a job during the day to pay their bills and feed their families, and then they come home and they deal with they deal with things there, and then they work on this game in whatever hours they have left in the day. I work about 50 to 60 hours a week on this, and I'm not even reliably getting paid to work on it.
If at all.
Yeah, sort of the. I didn't say it. You did. I was trying to be nice, and that goes for a lot of people on the art team. That goes for a lot of people working on this project. It's been a labor of love and sweat equity more than anything. So our priorities are on basically things that help us to get funding and generate interest in the project. That said, what I'd like to sort of bring this all back to is we're going to get a basic game working so that all things decided, we will have a basic game working. We will have something that can be expanded on, that can be further developed on and sold if need be. And then from there, we will expand into the more, shall we say, interesting features.
And you can change this. You can make this happen. For $1 a day, you can give Mike ramen noodles and a bed for him to sleep in.
Sponsor your gear.
Dev's gotta eat.
That's
Sponsor your heavy gear dev today.
For your pledge, we will give you a gear and some in-game currency.
We need a picture of a sad dev sitting there just staring at a
Make
computer
Alex
screen.
get on
A
it.
sad heavy gear that's all broken.
I've got a picture of myself, but it looks like I seriously look like a freaking mad scientist. I've got this screen behind me with an eye on it, and it's just looking at the camera.
I look like a serial killer in my pictures. Don't worry about it.
Make yourself a heavy gear, just like your own persona of a heavy gear. He's just sad, run down. He needs some replacements. He needs a tune-up. And he's just hard on his luck.
And while we're on the subject, I did want to ask John. Obviously, it's a bit of a touchy subject, and I don't want to step on any toes here, but I do want to ask, if should the Kickstarter fail, what's the game plan? I'm assuming funding's still going to keep going through the Heavy Gear Assault website, but what other options are y'all looking at as far as keeping the development going?
Well, we're discussing internally what we would do because we really want to bring this game to market. And at this point, the reason why we went to Kickstarter is primarily the reason why we wanted the funding to do this. It was our primary means to do so. That being said, if our Kickstarter fails, we would definitely have to evaluate our position.
Well, at least we know that there's not going to be any our position at the time situations. Thank God.
No, you guys are very transparent. I really like this.
We do appreciate that. As gamers and denizens of the internet in general, we do appreciate transparency in any possible way.
This is from the very start. We've wanted the fate of Heavy Gear Assault to be in the hands of you, the players, and not some massive publisher that's going to focus test it into oblivion. For me, as a programmer and as a developer, there are dream features that you would love to see in a mech simulator that you fantasized about when you were a kid. Wouldn't it be cool if you could play as the pilot? If you could get out and jump into another machine, or if you could get out and operate a control panel and drop a crane on top of somebody's head? Man, that'd be awesome. And actually, I got that working. But
oh, that's badass.
Yeah,
that's a nice segue there.
Sold.
We have a crane drop.
as it turns out, one of the dream features that already works is being able to hop out as the pilot and play as the pilot. We're experimenting a lot with.
You can see that stuff in our E3 trailer with the gear.
I thought that was all animation. I was just like, okay.
No!
It looked a little scripted.
That's all.
That's real. That's real. I programmed that shit to work.
I've got one last question. Just one last question. If you hit the Heavy Gear Real Hardcore, that's my phone. If you hit the Heavy Gear Real Hardcore, will the pilot pop out and ragdoll all over hell?
A few things that can happen. I don't think I thought far enough ahead for that to happen yet. It should. Part of the reason for the pilot is because of our damage system. If you blow off the head or if you disable the head of the gear, the camera kind of goes out. So the cockpit pops open and you fight open cockpit.
I have a question involving character death.
Yes, I noticed that.
What happens if you die in game?
Working on it. That's the most honest answer I can give you.
If you die in game, you die in the real world.
That is the most honest answer we can give, because the designers are still talking about permadeath.
They're debating hotly everything the pilot can do, because there has not been a mech game that allows you to play as the pilot in this kind of detail.
Just steal from Star Citizen. Make it where, the son or the child or whatever gets it. It's so perfect.
Their pet monkey.
that was a suggestion. Another suggestion is that you are technically the manager and you just play as a pilot during a match, and when you lose a pilot, you have to hire a new pilot. There's the suggestion that when the pilot gets injured, there's all sorts of future medicine that can bring the pilot back. There's been suggestions about genetic engineering.
Cybernetics.
Cybernetics. We're talking about a lot of different things that can happen when the pilot dies. It's kind of one of the most exciting things that we talk about on design is, dude,
we can rebuild him. We have
what can the pilot do?
You know what's funny? They actually do have the technology. Cybernetics is pretty commonplace.
Yes, and with the gear pilots and their sponsorships in the arena, with the kind of money they're throwing around compared to the military, they could totally get some serious reconstruction. You know, it's not implausible at all that death simply means, you know, like kind of the flow of it that we're looking at. You know, in terms of sheer hard practical gameplay, right? And as opposed to lore and explaining what's going on and what happens outside the arena, kind of in terms of the flow of a match is your gear gets damaged. It's going critical. It's about to blow. So you hit the eject button, you hop out, and you, as the pilot, if you can escape the arena with your life, you basically get an experience bonus. You know,
I can't just pop a little white flag out of the top of my heavy gear like in Girls and Panzer and just have it be done that way.
We'll think about that, but that's not the flow that we're looking at. We're looking at you getting prestige and getting experience for being able to escape the gear with your life once your gear is exploded. We are also looking at different interactive objects in arenas that you can use if you're the pilot to kind of take back the match. Like, if you think about fighting in a junkyard type arena, there could be a downed gear in there just sitting there waiting to be picked up by a pilot who's lost his gear. And it's a crummy downed gear, but it's better than nothing. So it's like the match doesn't stop just because your gear blew up, you know? And then after that, if the pilot, regardless of whether the pilot gets out or whether the pilot gets squashed, then you simply would be going to spectator mode, and you would be able to either leave the match safely or watch it continue from spectator mode.
Okay, so just want to move on. I've got a few last community questions before we wrap up. One of the ones that I wanted to talk about, and I don't think it really fell into the line of conversation originally, but obviously with mech games, you've got two big sort of viewpoints. A lot of people like to see their mech and they like to play in third person, and then you have a lot of people who like to sit inside the mech and pilot the mech from inside. I know MechWarrior and Armored Core have both had different games where you could do both, and I'm wondering how you guys would want to balance that out. And then after you answer that, I've got a few more quick community questions before we wrap up.
Could you repeat the question really quick? I got a little distracted by the chat.
Just asking, how are y'all planning to implement and balance third-person viewpoints versus first-person viewpoints?
Okay. I apologize. Sorry.
It's not a problem.
So, right. First person versus third person. First person we're looking at as kind of our default. For more reasons than one. It's simply the most natural, I think, perspective for you to take in a simulationist type of game. And besides that, we are looking at Oculus Rift support. What better way to deal with the Oculus Rift than from first-person perspective? And yes, we're looking at the idea of, turning your head in the real world and thus turning the gear's head in the game, and being able to look around that way. Fumbling my words a little bit here. In terms of third-person perspective, though, yeah, we're implementing a third-person option where you can, as kind of an accessory, I think we were talking about, or an upgrade, you can add in a third-person camera that you can launch that will allow you to take in a third-person view of your gear. And it can be destroyed, primarily for the reason of supporting melee combat. Because in melee combat, you sort of want more of an awareness of your body. Malphas, yeah, that would be a possible idea of what to do with third-person cameras, is using it to fly around and scout the arena for you. That is certainly a possibility. But
Can't beat them drones, man.
In support of the melee combat, yeah, you typically want to be able to have more of an awareness of your body, especially when doing special attacks. Like that power slide attack I talked about earlier, that would be all kinds of hectic in a first-person viewpoint. And to be fair, our melee combat system has a very accurate weapon trace and a very accurate, vision of what your melee weapon is hitting. But that's still very, very hectic, and it would be difficult to aim. You'd sort of see this blur of different things going on and be crossing your fingers that you hit. And that can be very exciting for a lot of players. But at the same time, we want provisions in place to make it usable. You know what I mean? Yes, Kylus, melee weapons. I think this is another question in your list here is about melee combat. Do we want to address melee combat a little bit more?
Yes, yeah, sure. That was one of the community questions we had.
Okay.
Kalis did ask about how is the damage model going to be handled for like two legs and critical systems and whatnot, and how is that going to work with melee?
Okay, in terms of melee, still a little bit of experimenting going on in terms of the technical aspects of melee damage. Melee weapons deliver damage in a very different way than projectiles and like ray traces do. In that it is, I don't want to say that this is the final version of how it works in game, but in terms of the programming of it, if you don't artificially limit it, it's possible for a melee weapon right now to hit more than once as it goes through something. So it's technically possible right now to just saw through with a vibro sword and cut through multiple components at a time, right? For my vision of how melee works, that's okay, as long as it only hits each component once. If it hits everything like 100 times in a second, that's a big problem. But, that's sort of something that we're experimenting with a little bit. In terms of how melee actually works, we don't want to oversimplify it to the point where all you're doing is like a combat knife and you just do one quick swing and it insta-kills people. We don't want to do something that's just, because it's gladiatorial combat, right? You're fighting in an arena with gladiator gears and gladiator weapons. You want to get some longevity out of that fight. You know what I mean? You want melee to be devastating if you're in the middle of a normal match and you hit somebody with a melee attack. You want it to be, deliberate and precise, and you want it to really frigging hurt when you take out someone's legs with a vibro sword, or better yet, a two-handed chainsword. But you don't want it to be to the point where melee is the all-powerful god of the game. And the other thing that you don't want is for it to be too chaotic and noisy. Like, you don't want to do too hack and slash like combat where all everybody does is mash buttons aimlessly. To that end, we've adopted a system wherein you have a melee weapon equipped, right? You hold down the mouse button for that hand that you're using. So it's like one mouse button for one hand, one mouse button for another hand. That's kind of how you're using weapons. But you hold down the mouse button for that melee weapon, and depending on what direction you're moving the mouse in as you do it, it sort of reads the mouse delta and pulls back the weapon in that direction. And so when you release, then it will swing the weapon from that direction towards, in front of you. And that's kind of the default usage of it. And meanwhile, your torso twist still works while you're pulling back the weapon, and it will allow you to aim it a little more precisely. So it's kind of this balance of horizontal and vertical attacks and stabs and things like that, combined with things like the special attacks that I was mentioning earlier in order to create more variety and give it a lot of punch and some more specialized feels for people who want to specialize in melee combat, right? Who want to make it more versatile and to be able to do more interesting things like a spin attack or a sly brush that'll close a lot of distance and let them get in a solid hit. But for the normal attacks, you can get a lot of precision. You can control how powerful it is by how long you kind of hold it down. And basically that deliberate motion is where we're looking at getting the effectiveness out of, is by giving you the ability to target things a little bit more deliberately than if you were just sort of aimlessly swinging a weapon. And, to add to that a little bit, different classes of gears have different advantages going into melee. Heavier, like assault class gears, are obviously putting a lot more weight into their swings. Lighter gear classes are simply faster on their feet and can maneuver around opponents more. And so different builds of gears give different advantages. That light gear might be able to run circles around an assault class, move in, and with a couple of well-placed hits to the armor, be able to shed some of it off and make that heavier gear vulnerable to the more lightweight weapons fire that its teammates can spit out at close range. So that probably that answers a little bit of your questions about where melee fits into the bigger picture, but that's sort of how it fits into the smaller picture of how it's dealing with the damage system. The weapon trace that comes off of a melee weapon is, much thanks to Matt Jones, that other full-time programmer I was kind of telling you about, very precise, where it follows the blade almost exactly, and so you're able to get very, very precise hits out of it. What you see is what you hit, for lack of a better term.
So since you're talking about what you see is what you hit, Hoax did have a question that he submitted to us via our forum asking about cone of fire for aiming. Like, how is aiming going to work? Is it going to be something like, like MechWarrior or any other mech game where you have kind of a lock-on system, or you can just, all your shots are going to go right to the center wherever you put your reticle, or is recoil and whatnot going to be kind of implemented into this, where if you're firing like a heavy handheld autocannon, it starts to kind of jump around a little bit and you're not hitting all in the same spot?
I can describe to you exactly how the recoil works. I should probably withhold the information because that's kind of secret sauce. However, to put it in layman's terms, in terms of the gameplay experience you're having, the Unreal Voodoo. Sorry, I looked at the chat again.
I know.
I'm sorry. I love these guys so much. But in terms of the way the aiming works, every weapon... Screw it, I'll just explain how it works. Every weapon has both an effective range designated and a sort of deviation. How far from where the crosshair hits is it going to wander? Can it wander, I should say, within that increment of distance? So you can give it 1,000 meters of distance and give it like 50 meters of deviation, and basically that comes down to, okay, every 1,000 meters it will tend to wander 50 meters away from my crosshair, which is ridiculous, actually. That is a huge amount of deviation. But yeah, that's sort of how the weapon's recoil is being factored into. That's sort of how its accuracy, I should say, is being factored into things. And then that is constrained further by the hydraulics in your gear's arms. So the stronger your gear is in the arms, as opposed to faster, you can have faster arms for faster melee attacks and stronger arms for stronger melee attacks and better recoil compensation, right? That's in terms of how the gear constrains the recoil compensation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Basaga, you had a question?
Just to add a little bit more to that, that's where the gear customization optimization play that we were talking about earlier tonight comes into play as well. When we were saying that you can modify the output of your horsepower and the strength of your actuators and such.
Yeah, so having stronger but slower actuators, right, can give you a slower melee swing that's more predictable and takes like finicky timing in order to hit something, but it'll also frickin' pile drive its way through smaller gears with ease and send them flying, potentially, if you've got the right type of weapon for that. Your impact strength will just go through the roof. Whereas faster actuators might give you much, much quicker combo ability and things like that, and let you inflict hits more accurately, more easily. I just kind of stopped there. I'm sorry, but that's
Don't worry too much. I can edit it.
That's the thought.
Enchanting.
So, Vasago, you have a
Yeah.
question?
In case you didn't catch all that, here's the summary. This is more like Metal Gear Rising than Call of Duty. You don't stab them. One knife. You don't do that. You have to move your mouse around and do combos, and you can plan and customize
Can I
and
grab
choose
the
different
pilot?
swords.
Can I grab the pilot out of the enemy gear and then squeeze him to death and yell "bullseye"? Because that would just really make this work.
We'd
Fishing
like
moves?
to. We'd like to let you do that. We'll see how it goes. That's a bit. That's. Give me some time for that. But that's a
It was
very,
more of a joke than anything, but
Yeah, it's more of a joke.
That's a very specialized. You can certainly bust their head open and force them to fight open cockpit, and then fire a heavy rifle into their freaking cockpit and just make them a bloody mess.
Or you can flamethrower them.
Yes, that's equally effective.
Yeah.
We haven't even talked about the heat system yet, and I haven't even implemented the heat system yet. So we'll hold off on the heat system for a while.
One thing at a
Sounds good.
time.
So, moving on to just live audience questions. I think Kalis had something, and we got something from Malphus and then Rickman as well. So, Kalis, go ahead.
So essentially, from your melee combat spiel, it seems that you're kind of implementing almost like a Mountain Blade kind of combat system. Are you familiar with that game at all? Is that what you're aiming for?
That is more or less the exact point of study that we took for this. Yes,
That's a
observing
fantastic idea because a lot of people love that.
Yeah, we observed that games like Mountain Blade, War of the Roses, and that sort of thing, those very deliberate type of melee combat games, fare a lot better as platforms for multiplayer melee combat than
Skyrim, say.
than the likes of Skyrim or Devil May Cry or I don't want to.
Not that we're dissing those games.
Then those are some of my favorite. Space Marine was the one I was going to bring up.
Yeah, that was pretty good too.
Yeah, I enjoyed the hell out of all those games, but it just not necessarily right for standalone multiplayer, like melee combat. You know what I mean?
Against another human being.
Right. That's kind of
That's
more
the key point. Yeah.
You're hitting on so many cylinders. You're talking about customized mechs, like all the way to the nth degree, including pimping them out, as well as picking your shots, and you said stabs, slices, as well as missiles and flamethrowers and guns. I mean, you're doing a really good job here.
Well, that's, again, I want to bring this point up. That's the whole reason that we adopted the arena concept, was it would allow us to realize all these very detailed mechanics in a very reasonable scope. Like, a game like Call of Duty, not to rag on Call of Duty at all, could never attempt this sort of thing, simply because they have this ridiculous production values that they have to live up to. They've got the single-player campaign that they're under great duress to implement. Looking at this from the perspective of starting with the arena and working our way up, we could implement all these mechanics in a perfectly reasonable context. In a perfectly, it makes sense for this game kind of context, and then from there use this base that we've already built for this online arena game to build a further single-player campaign that makes use of all these detailed systems that we're talking about, and thus delivers one of the greatest single-player campaigns that you could possibly want. But
Most action-packed, anyway.
But it's a matter of it's a matter of setting priorities sensibly, especially considering that we are not coming from a AAA established game studio type of background. We're approaching this as a series of fans who loves these mech games and wants to make the mech game of people's dreams.
So, moving on to Rifleman's question, he was asking, being developers, not really advertising guys. Well, John being excluded, obviously. You've made promises on the donation scale for the homepage, telling people what you would get per dollar donated. But to a lot of people, it's not really clear what these are going to do for you in game, like the difference between mechs, the team managers and technician advantages and whatnot. Could you clarify a little bit on those? And are you all planning to kind of update those pages a little bit?
Yeah, we are planning to do a massive cleanup of our page. We already started some of the sponsorship. I believe I filmed myself talking about some of those pledge levels in the very beginning of the Kickstarter. It's on our YouTube channel as well, and we tried best as we could to explain some of the concepts that we had going on. Because as you through the course of this conversation, you really seen how many cylinders we're targeting. So seems to have a big mass of information out there that we're trying to clear up right now.
What does the clown do?
The clown is like a pet. The pet.
Oh yeah, the rules for the clown. The rules for the clown.
Wait, we have clowns?
Yeah,
you have a clown.
It's like freaking rodeo clowns.
Yeah, that's in the Heavy Gear Arena rulebook too. You can look that
up.
There is a rodeo clown gear that you can hire to taunt your enemies. It has a cannon. It has a cannon that fires T-shirts into the crowd.
Or beer, or whatever.
Yeah.
or seltzer water, or like whipped cream.
This is way low priority. I would love to have a game type where you play as the clown and try to survive.
Yeah, you run around teabagging down players.
Like all the other stuff. All the other modes that we can think of are much higher priority than that. So don't quote me on that one.
Well, it's on audio now, so I can't help it. So as we, just to wrap up here, just one last question for you, if you could just summarize for us, just real quick. Obviously, we got all these free-to-play games out in the world, and quite a few mech games now. Hawken, MechWarrior Online, now Titanfall, coming out on the new consoles and PC, and a few other things. So, what exactly is it that's going to set Heavy Gear Assault apart from these other free-to-play games and other mech games in general? And just kind of sell it on us.
I would say basically the level of detail that we're trying to put into the simulation and the customization is something that sets us apart. The number of options, like melee combat, right? We are more or less, I don't want to be too definitive about this, but we are more or less the only melee combat-oriented mech simulator out there.
I wouldn't say melee oriented, but I was saying we're giving half and half to it.
Yeah, right. I don't want to.
As it should be.
Yeah, we don't. There aren't a lot of other people who have a detailed melee combat system for mech games. Like, it doesn't make sense in BattleTech, right?
Yeah. Well, it does in BattleTech, sort of.
Well,
there are no in the CPT rules. In the CPT rules, you have a lot of rules for melee combat, like the Atlas. You don't ever want to get close to the Atlas because the Atlas is packing a whole ton of close-range weapons, and then it can punch you for a ridiculous amount of damage, too.
Yeah, but that's not the majority of mechs,
Right.
But in Heavy Gear, yeah, they've got arms, they've got legs, they're maneuverable at least as much as a person, at least to a certain extent.
At the very least, they can throw gear-sized hand grenades. At the very least.
I would suppose that the best answer that I could give you is we're trying to breathe a lot of life into this from this universe, which I hope we have demonstrated for you tonight is filled with personality. filled with personality.
I do love it. I mean, having gone into this with very little knowledge about heavy gear, I do love just kind of how, I don't want to say silly, but just how flamboyant, I guess the best way to put it.
Yes.
It's got a lot of
word.
character to it. Instead of being
cheeky.
real grim dark.
It's very cheeky, is how I would describe it. And, we want that sense of fun, particularly in the different opportunities that the sporting event type of experience gives us to sort of bleed through this game and to inform a level of detail to the mechanics and the simulation of your gear that you wouldn't have seen before in previous mech games.
Just one last question from Malthus, and then we'll wrap up.
I've got a few questions, but I think I could just wrap it up into, I have ADHD, and I want to know, how context-sensitive is this game? I've asked a lot of really interesting questions.
How context-sensitive?
Yeah, can I rip someone's arm off and beat them with it, or can I jump over an entire gear, or just various things? How context-sensitive is this arena going to be?
Well, when we were sitting down to originally design this with the design team, one of the things we wanted to make happen was the ability to dismember an opponent's gear and then either steal their weapon and use it against them, or even use the arm itself and beat the crap out of the gear that we severed it from.
I won't actually guarantee that you can beat somebody with their arm, because that system is the physics system on gears is surprisingly tricky for us to get working properly right now. So it's like, we'll be happy for you to dismember them, and you will be dismembering them. One way or another, you will be dismembering them.
All right.
In terms of context-sensitive stuff that you can do, there is a context-sensitive use button that we are attempting to use for a variety of different purposes. One of them is being able to grab gears. One of them is like a quick melee attack kind of thing for if you don't have your melee weapon drawn, but you've got something with a bayonet mounted on it. Then
or rifle butting.
Yeah, or rifle butting. The other things that we're looking at are special movement types. So I talk about the macro move system, right? In the same kind of breath that works, there are context-sensitive objects that can prompt special movement modes. So you hit the F key, and it will, say, allow you to grind on a big pipe. There's a lot of comments in the chat where people are bringing up Tony Hawk, and yes, we do derive a bit of inspiration from that. So that, mainly in the movement system and the types of really pro sports type of movements that you can do, are context-sensitive actions that we're trying to do. In terms of melee actions, in terms of grabbing someone's arm and ripping it off, we're mainly looking at integrating that into the melee combat system. You want to dismember somebody, pull out your vibro sword or your vibro knife and cleave at their joints. You know, that's kind of the attitude that I take on it.
So we could disable a part if we aimed for it, such as their eye or their wrist joint?
Oh yeah. Every different part has a structure rating. Every different part has an armor rating that will deplete as it takes hits, that prevents a certain amount of structure damage. And yeah, you absolutely can aim at individual parts to cause different effects.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for showing up today, guys. We learned a lot about this game. It sounds really awesome. John, Mike, I do want to appreciate you guys taking the time to come out here and speak to us tonight.
You should do it often.
We should do it.
Yeah, feel free
often.
to stop by and listen in. You know, when we record our standard cast. For those of you who are interested in Heavy Gear Assault, you can more about their game and donate to, or pledge rather, to their their project at heavygear.com. If you've got more questions for them, obviously Malthus has had question after question after question tonight, and I'm sure he's got more.
ADHD, I'm sorry.
But they've got they do have a forums that you can pull up on mektek.net. You can go there and speak to them about Heavy Gear Assault directly. So that has been Concast. Again, once more, I'd just like to really thank John and Mike for coming out here tonight. It's been a real pleasure having them out and talking to us. Looking forward to seeing you guys next week. We'll be back talking about MechWarrior Online.
Usual schedule will resume.
Yeah, same Kong time, same Kong channel, and all that fun stuff.
Thanks
a lot, guys.
Before
Thank
we
you
quit,
very much.
you should get involved. You should really give this a try. Go and at least have a look.
Have a look at
you
what?
like robots. You like robots. Give it a try.
Any support you're willing to give would be very, very helpful to us. Yes.
Even if it's just a visit to the forum, get involved.
All right. Well, thank you very much, guys. This has been Concast, and we'll see you next week. This is Valkyrie signing off. Connor has had to leave the building a little bit early. We will see you all next week, and have fun.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Take
much.
care.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks all.